Akash? Okay, awesome, thanks. Welcome everyone to ACDE number 219. Have a bunch of things on the agenda as always today. We'll chat about Fusaka, how the devnets are going, especially the non-finality testing we've done this week. Then there's some configuration PRs for the Panda ops wanted to review, and we can chat about what the next steps should be from here. After that, I wanted to check in on Holešky. So we discussed shutting down the testnet at the end of September. So want to make sure that this still works for everyone. We can chat a bit about some EL gas limit bottlenecks, continuing the conversation for Monday, and then discuss some updates around Amsterdam's and how we should approach EIP discussions for the fork. But to kick us off, does Panda Ops want to give an update on the current devnets, where we're at, and how the testing has been going this week?
Sure. Devnet 3 has been going through a non-finality period for a little bit longer than we anticipated. We wanted to do approximately 2 days first, and now we're hitting day 5. We've been trying to recover the chain, and we have encountered a bunch of syncing issues that different clients had. There are lots of fixes coming in, and we've been rolling those out as they come. We are approximately at 50 to 55% participation now. I have triggered a few exits from NimbusCL to try to gain back the finality. Those are being processed slowly. NimbusCL been struggling to keep up with the non-finality period, and there has been quite some memory issues there. That's why we decided to kick some validators off. Regarding nodes that are still struggling to sync up, Lighthouse seem to be stuck syncing. We made many different ELs. Lodestar seems to be stuck syncing as well. Branding seems to have an issue, and a few Teku nodes as well. Most of the Prism nodes are fine, and most of the Teku nodes are also fine, but a few of them seem to have some memory issues. Regarding the ELs, there's also seems to be a few bugs reported by Ergon and Bezu that they are investigating.
Thank you. Any of the client teams want to chime in or share more context?
There would be another update. So we did a non-finality test on NFT devnet 9, which was basically pre-Fulu with using all the latest stable releases from each EL and CL. And we tried to replicate the same non-finality. We were offline for, I think, a day and a half, and we brought the nodes back online, and the chain has recovered within, I think, 2 hours.
Nice. Yeah, any client teams or anyone else have context they want to share on the devnets?
One of the main differences that could be, I just want to make sure that this is set out, is on the Fusaka devnet 3, the initial way how we try to recover the chain is just removing the EL database and resync using the CL database without checkpoint syncing, and hoping that all the CL clients would just reorg back to the invalid block. And on NFT devnet 9, we have actually wiped the database of the EL and the CL, and the recovery was very fast there. And on NFT devnet 9, we seem to have about 80% participation. And yeah, I think we also had 80% participation before, and there seem to be a few Ergon nodes offline there.
Yeah, the main reason we made the change for NFT DevNet 9 was that there was none left on the network to provide the invalid state because we did the resyncing kind of all at once. So there was just no peers to get the invalid chain to then claim it was invalid.
Got it. So in terms of next steps for the DevNet, obviously we want to fix the issues that we found, and the CL teams are working on that. Do we think we want to have another DevNet after this? I assume we at least want to get this non-finalized DevNet back to finalizing. But yes, after that, would we move forward and launch DevNet 5? Do we want to do that in parallel?
So ideally, DevNet 3 should recover to close to 100%, and then we would want to do another non-finality test and see if we can actually recover within a reasonable period of time, just to make sure that we have actually ironed out all the bugs. Launching DevNet 5 with known syncing issues is probably not worth it.
Yeah, that makes sense. And do we think most syncing issues should be like at least have tentative fixes this week? Is that something we think we can like get live on the DevNet today or tomorrow and see it progress over the weekend, or do teams feel like they're going to need more time to address those?
I can speak for Prism. It should be okay for this week.
Okay, Lighthouse is saying good by mid next week. Any other teams?
Maybe
Chat.
one thing also worth mentioning is now that we have we have like a malicious get image as well as a Nethermind image that we can trigger this fork very easily and cause non-finality and everything on DevNet 3. We should be able to reproduce this as often as clients want. So if we have one client with a fix, we can already deploy it and already try out their fix, and we don't have to wait for all clients to be ready before we do another test. And same thing goes for DevNet 5. We've sped up our Ansible stack significantly, so it should reduce the amount of time we take to spin up like larger networks now.
Awesome, thanks. And yeah, so Lighthouse is saying they should probably have a fix by mid next week. Curious how the other CL teams are looking like. I guess this would mean we probably don't launch DevNet 5 until like at least a week from now, once we've had time to actually deploy these fixes and potentially see the network recover. Is that relatively the timeline that teams think makes sense? And also, can we handle the DevNet 3 being non-finalized for another week? Will that compound problems somewhere or another? Okay, so Teku. Okay, so it seems like Teku, Lodestar as well, are gonna have fixes for next week. So like realistically, we're not gonna have all the CL fixes to get DevNet 3 finalizing by this week. Yeah, the only concern I could see is if things get significantly worse on the DevNet because it's not finalizing for what will be probably like 10 days by the time we have the fix. Then we may want to think about other ways of testing these fixes, or whether or not it's worth recovering DevNet 3 if it's fully degraded. But we can discuss this further, I think, on the testing call Monday and on Thursday if we need. But I would say we can finalize devnet 3 today. How would that work? Will you just make all the or like 2/3 of the stake Prism?
So maybe like we have a bunch of nodes that are syncing, but the sync times are just so long, especially during non-finality period. Forward syncing takes a bunch of time. So we can see that some nodes are still making progress and the participation is growing. So
Okay.
hopefully by the end of today, we're going to have a lot more nodes that are synced ahead and we're going to be able to reach 66%.
Okay,
and after
nice.
that, we could possibly get back to 100% participation by end of day tomorrow, hopefully, or very close to 100%, with just checkpoint syncing and removing the databases and forcing that way. And ideally, yes, the syncing the syncing fixes should be tested again. And if everybody says that they can be done by next week, by mid next week, then maybe we can trigger another non-finality next week. And in the end of next week, we can then schedule devnet 5 if everything goes smoothly on devnet 3.
Yeah, that sounds like a plan. Alex has a question asking, do we have any theories on why sync is slow?
Yeah, this might be a bit of a parallel thread to the present topic, but I am curious.
Okay, guess not. We can maybe discuss this when we have had more time to look into it on Monday or next Thursday. Anything else on the non-finality testing? Otherwise, Barnabas, you had the 4 PRs that you flagged. Yeah, to update the blob schedules on a bunch of the test nets. Yeah, you want to give a quick shot to those?
So that mainly Nethermind is the one that have a big change in how the blob schedule is handled. And ideally, we want to merge all these in by end of day tomorrow. And this is required for us to be able to do shadow forks on Holešky, Sepolia, and mainnet and Hoodie.
Anyone from Nethermind had a chance to look and can potentially give a quick +1 or -1?
Okay. Nethermind already approved it, but
okay.
I would just like to have a few more approvals from different EL teams because I know that some clients might rely on these files. So I just want to make sure that they are aware of this change.
Okay, so yeah, people can have a look, and I think if in 24 hours you haven't heard any complaints, we can go ahead and merge them.
Sounds good.
Okay. Okay. Next up, so Alex had posted an updated timeline for Fusaka. Obviously, you know, based on the current state of devnets, this might be a bit delayed. But yeah, Alex, do you want to give a bit more context on that? And curious also if others have had time to review. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I can walk through it. So essentially, just trying to track everything so that we can hit a pre-dev connect launch date for Fusaka. Basically, what we had discussed kind of before the past few days with the syncing issues, we would have trunk branches together by the end of this week, devnet 5 next week, do some analysis, use that to figure out how to set up Holešky and Sepolia. We would do those forks mid-September, or we'd have releases mid-September, do the forks later in the month. That would then set us up to do releases beginning of October for Hoodie and mainnet, do Hoodie, do mainnet. You can look at the dates here. And yeah, I mean, the thing is, this is all kind of on hold with the present issues with DevNet 3. So yeah, I think what we want to do is focus on DevNet 3. If we get DevNet 5 up next week, that'd be amazing, because then these dates don't change too much and we can kind of stick to the schedule. But yeah, it's slightly premature, just given the current status. So I think we all know what we need to do to keep moving forward.
Yeah, thanks. Anyone else have comments on this?
Yeah, so basically on Prism we have almost everything in the develop branch, which is our untable branch, but we continue to run the devnet tree on the PeerDAS branch because it's quite simpler. When you have a new bug detected, we just push the fix on the PeerDAS branch, which does not require any review, and when it works, we do a real code review and we push it in develop branch. So basically, develop branch and PeerDAS branch differs only on the new bug fix seen in the devnet. But yes, we have the backfill, which is not yet merged in develop, but else is everything else is merged.
Nice, thanks. Yeah, so there's a comment saying we don't have 1 month between the first release and the test nets, and yeah, so we would have the plan is to have 1 month between the mainnet releases and mainnet forking, but then we would have shorter time frames for the testnet forks, and notably Holešky would be kind of the shortest because we also plan to deprecate it shortly after the fork.
I mean, isn't that what we agreed, though? That we would have 1 month before the devnet forks after Pectra?
You mean testnet?
Or sorry, testnets. Like the complaint before was that we were making the Sepolia release, and then Sepolia happened like a week or two after, and the same thing with Holešky. And we kind of told the application companies that we would give them extra time.
I thought this was about mainnet.
I mean, mainnet we always have 1 month.
Yeah.
Like the complaint last time was not about mainnet; it was about Sepolia. I mean, I specifically remember Optimism being frustrated that they need to do a lot of work now based on they're waiting for the client releases to update their software, and then we fork the Sepolia network 1 or 2 weeks after we make those releases.
Yeah, and yeah, Frederick has this linked it, and this did say 30 days before the first test net.
It says in the process there that we should have 30 days between the first testnet and when the client release is ready.
Okay, so I guess if we wanted to do that, then yes, we would obviously have to modify the schedule quite a bit. It is something, we can do. We should probably get input from all of these L2s specifically as well, because they're also the main consumer of the blobs. So they may.
It's just like, how many times can we ask them, you know? It's like we just keep asking them until they don't respond, or they are tired of us asking. Because they kind of came and they told us what they wanted, and we haven't even had a hard fork since they told us what they wanted.
I will point out one difference is Pectra had many things that like impacted them directly and that they needed to like actually change, whereas Fusaka doesn't have things like this.
I mean, they have to calculate the proofs, so that's gonna fall on them.
Proofs?
The blob proofs.
Doesn't the EL handle this when you submit the blobs?
Do ELs handle this when people submit the blobs?
Yeah, like if I
Yeah,
give you a
they
blob
do.
over RPC, then the ELs handle this stuff, right? So my point is just that the things that we change in Fusaka are like fairly transparent to all the people we were just talking about, whereas with Pectra that was not the case. So I could see how, I think it makes sense for them to be like, okay, with something like Pectra, this makes sense. We need time to update, our code, whereas there's not that much here. So there's less reason to have so much time.
I just don't think that because we decide that there's less things for them to do, that we get to change what the agreement was before.
POTUS.
Rollups typically base their main node on as a fork of Geth or as a fork of whatever L1 client is. And this is the main reason why they required a lot of time between having a release and they themselves having a release that supports the same features of the fork. I think this is one of the reasons why they requested this extra time. And this is going to be independent of what kind of features they want to ship or not.
Thanks. Ansgar?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that, like, I think we have to be careful though to not make this mistake of like weighing the cost imposed onto a few very visible entities higher than basically the cost distributed more across like a larger set of people. I think there's costs both to a too accelerated rollout, like we just are discussing right now for L2s mostly, but then there's of course also a cost, for example, if say the outcome here would be, can we still ship the fork by the end of the year or slip into next year? That's like an extra month of delay. That also delays kind of like Amsterdam and the follow-on work. I think the problem is just that the people affected there is a much more diffuse set. It's basically like everyone in Ethereum, but only a little bit. And it's hard to weigh like a few people like strongly affected versus like a lot of people a little bit affected. But I think it's important that we don't only focus on one side of that of the picture.
I mean, we made a very unambiguous agreement with Rollups and other participants at the time with Pectra that we were going to give them 30 days from client release to a testnet. I don't understand why this is about the third time for Fusaka we've had to come back and like re-agree with this.
Can you
And we
show
shouldn't
me in the governance process where we did that, like the meta EIP for that? That was on Universal Agreed.
Frederick
I think
just
it was
posted.
mostly
Yeah,
Frederick just
communication.
posted it.
Doc. Yeah.
Like
Yeah,
it's
like the
in
doc, I understand, but like it was never, there was
processes.
no
It's in a folder
formal.
called processes.
I understand, but what I'm saying is like this is a best effort type of commitment, and like if there are costs, the circumstances arising, like I don't think it's a guarantee. I agree with you. Like we should try to stick to this as much as possible, but we should also try to like not let the Ethereum community down. Like there's a trade-off here.
The Ethereum community wants all of these systems to work, and they don't want all the applications and the layer twos to roll out half-baked updates. And L2s and apps asked for 30 days to give them the appropriate amount of time to securely upgrade their software.
Zoot POTUS.
Just stating the obvious here, but if we do have fixed 30 days for testnets, fixed 30 days at least for mainnet, and at least 30 days for devnets, it's really not realistic to have a 6-month fork cadence.
I don't think the devnet thing is correct, but yes, yes, if we have even 30 days for those two, and obviously they have to fork and go smoothly, that's probably 3 months you add to the process between like putting out the first release and having mainnet go live. Yeah.
It does say 30 days before the first testnet, so like we can pipeline the testnets a bit. It doesn't have to be 1 month between each testnet.
Oh yeah, for sure. But then I think we also want at least a week between each of these testnets, and even that, if there is an issue, a week is not like it's doable to fix the issue within a week, but it's kind of a rush timeline. Yeah.
I think we decided that it should be 14 days apart from each upgrade.
Right. So fastest possible is 2.5 months, or I guess the 14 days add together before mainnet.
Yeah, so
I
that's
think it's
basically
about
3
maybe
months.
7 days, something like that, if the process is followed like, by the book.
I think one of the difference between earlier folks is also we're requiring almost every client, if not all clients, to have all of their changes in their trunk branches before we start talking about testnet releases. I don't necessarily think this was always the case. That's also another location where we're adding like a few weeks, which in the past we wouldn't have.
Sorry, I don't know if I follow that. You're saying we didn't require for a testnet release
Exactly, for a
the
testnet release. In
changes?
the past, it was very often that you'd get an RC release from a branch.
Okay. I feel like at least for us, we've always, for a testnet release, we've made an actual Go Ethereum release. And so at that point, the new code is available for people to begin integrating with. I guess some other clients did that differently.
Okay, so I think there's, I guess, 2 paths forward. One is we kind of base the release schedule just on this process doc, and based on the previous discussion around DevNet 5, if we assume DevNet 5 goes well, we fix these finality bugs. We could set the date for the first testnet and kind of just schedule out from there. I think if we want to have a shorter I think if we want to have a shorter schedule, then maybe it's worth trying to get explicit feedback from these L2s and other infra providers again, potentially opening up a PR to Frederick's doc and trying to get like some I guess input from the community there. Realistically, we don't have to make this call today. Like we still have time because we're still fixing DevNet 5, but I think over the next week, if we could actually get if we could actually get like some rollups to share their preferences, even though we've asked them in the past, I think it's probably valuable, and they are kind of the main stakeholder being affected here.
Yeah, so I can make a version following the stock to the letter. I will also reach out to some rollups and try to understand if they care. Let's see.
Yeah, and I think
Is
if
it
we can
worth
get
talking to other parties beyond rollups?
Staking pools would be affected by the KCG proofs on the sidecar, perhaps. I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I'll
Like
yeah, I'll
restaking
reach
pools,
out.
perhaps. I don't know.
Yeah, I'll reach out to some people.
Okay. And yeah, I think if we do change it, we should just we should like actually open a PR to this process doc and make it clear what the change is. Yeah, and that's also like a concrete place we can send folks to like voice their preferences.
I just think it's a really bad precedent to keep letting decisions change. Like we've talked about this in many different contexts. We even talked about this exact situation about a month ago when we started putting out the timelines for Fusaka because we had forgotten and then remembered about the agreement we made. And we said, okay, we really need to think about this. And, we need to get the releases out mid-August as the only possible way to get a pre-Dev Connect Fusaka. And now it seems like we just keep kind of changing what our agreement is to fit to this arbitrary deadline that we've imposed upon ourselves. And I just don't think that's fair for the people who are not full-time people part of this process to have to again and again come and say what their preferences are.
I think that's true, but I also think that there is like a a big part of the community that does want Fusaka to ship, and they don't come and say like, oh, we want the fork to happen in 1 week after the testnet release or something like that. So yeah.
I don't think we should choose timelines based on what the community necessarily wants. Like the people who are shipping the software said they want 30 days to deliver high quality software that the community is going to use. So until we like revisit that decision with all of the people involved, there's really not that much point of arguing about it.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. But I think we should at least double check with these like rollups and infra providers that this is still their preference, because the same way we had forgotten about it until it came time to do the releases, it's not clear to me that they all have this expectation. And yeah, like I think if this is what everyone wants, then great, we can stick with it. But we should make sure that this is actually what they want. And I'm not 100% convinced that they would still stand by this. Yeah, so I don't think it's like a super high cost to check this in the next week or so. And we can follow up with like, who was involved in the original discussion.
But just to be clear, the decision is to stick to what we have already agreed upon, meaning the 30 days outlined in the document, right? Like, we assume that what we currently know is still true until we hear otherwise. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, we can prep the schedule like we haven't chosen either way yet, but like, yes, we should prep the schedule with what's in the document, and then in parallel, check with like the stakeholders that are affected if this is like still their preference, and if so, then we would stick there. But I think if we get other signals, we should also propose like some alternate schedule, and do that also by like changing the process doc to kind of reflect these updated preferences. Okay, I think we can follow this up async. Anything else on the timelines people wanted to discuss? Okay, related to this, so we did say we were going to deprecate Holešky after going live with this fork, and that would mean probably shut it down sometime at the end of September. We want to put an announcement up for this, but before doing so, just wanted to check in here if anyone has any reasons why they would need the testnet longer, or think that we should somehow push that out. Otherwise, in the next week or so, we'll just put up an announcement saying that Holešky will just be shut down a couple weeks after Fusaka goes live on it. Okay, no one fighting to keep Holešky longer. So yeah, expect a blog post in the next week or so with an update on that. Anything else around Fusaka people want to discuss before we move on? Okay. Next up, so on Monday we discussed some of the gas limit work. We were trying to see whether we could raise to 60 million before Fusaka would go live. Some of the EL clients were looking into some performance bottlenecks and trying to see what potential paths were to addressing those. So I just wanted to check in and see if anyone had updates on that work generally, in terms of just potentially moving to 60 million before Fusaka, or at least, yeah, getting somewhere there.
I can add a few words for Besu. So we were a bit hammered with the mod and division, and so we are looking at those opcodes, and we have a working implementation for mods and div that we will most likely want to test in a few days. Which is much more performant than the previous one. So yeah, we're making progress on that front.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing. Anyone else have updates on this?
Question around signaling, because it does take a while between signaling and the gas going up. What would be the, I suppose, the process or the timeline? Do we wait until everything's happy and confirmed, or do we signal a bit sooner with everything in sight?
I think we should wait until no client has like major concerns, because going from 45 to 60, like in terms of actual block updates, happens pretty quickly. I think what helps also with the signaling and just the adoption is if it's actually included in a release. So one thing that could be nice is if we're confident in going to 60 before Fusaka goes live on mainnet, then we could potentially just have the clients default to 60 in, say, the first testnet release, so that the first testnet release, if people run that on mainnet, it defaults to 60 million gas. So I think that's an option, but I wouldn't want to just, I don't know, if Besu still hasn't tested like their improvements, I don't think we should like soft signal and kind of force Besu to catch up that way. Yeah, Ansgar?
Yeah, I think maybe concretely, I think it's good if our process basically, as you said, right, that like the threshold should be that every client has a release out that we are confident can handle the kind of the new gas limit that we are signaling. But I think there's no need for us to wait for any specific adoption metric on that on those new client releases, because I think if there were any hiccups, basically the important thing is that people can quickly upgrade to the version that can handle it. As Ben was saying, it will take some while for this to be rolled out anyway. In the meantime, people are upgrading. So I think basically like that seems like to strike a good balance. Basically, clients releases out, but no specific threshold for adoption.
Oh yeah, exactly. And this is why I think if we can couple it to releases that more people are going to be using anyways, then that's good. Like at the very latest, if we say we want this before Fusaka, all the Fusaka mainnet releases should default to 60 million, right? Like, but yeah, I think the testnet releases on the way there are just like, yeah, also a good opportunity to put this as a default. And as long as every client team has a release that could handle this, then we're generally in a good spot. And this, yeah, Terrence has a comment like this also includes CL releases, because the CL releases kind of set the values for Mev Boost, which is where most of the blocks get built. Lewis has a question about Zen. Does anyone have more context around like the specific bottlenecks around Zen and how that's blocking for 60 million? Sorry, Ben, you were going to say something?
Yeah, just more related to the ELs and CLs that the ELs sort of determine whether they can handle it, but we have to wait for the CLs to update their defaults. I was just wondering if it'd be better to have a mechanism where the CL could query the EL, what the gas limit they should be registering with us.
Yeah, and to be clear, we don't need to wait though, right? Like operators can update themselves. It's just not the default, but yeah, Terence.
No, I was gonna say it's possible to do that, but that's like an engine API change, and engine API is typically like we only change that during like a network upgrade. So for Fusaka, it's probably too late.
Yeah, we probably should be changing the engine API design this far late in the process. Yeah. Felix?
Just as a quick comment, so I don't think that is technically true that we can only change the engine API on a fork boundary, especially for this kind of thing, which would be a new feature anyways. But also, I think it is totally possible even now with the existing RPC API for the CL to query the EL and then adjust itself based on that. Like, I don't think this is technically like an engine API change that requires a fork or an EIP. We can just kind of do this.
Yeah, I guess it requires the CLs changing how they pass that value through. But yeah. And yeah, Perry on the Zen comment said that it wasn't their focus yet, but they have a benchmarking and they can gather data on any issues with that. Any other updates or thoughts on the 60 million? Okay, then I guess we can move on to Amsterdam. So first off, we had a block access list breakout this week, the first one. Yeah, is there anything from there that people wanted to bring up or discuss?
Yeah, I can give a quick summary. Basically, the EIP 7928 breakout call is not happening every 2 weeks. So if you want to join, feel free to do so. Clients are quite busy at the moment in implementing the EIP. Right now, every client team has started implementing, and I think got the feeling that we're getting closer to a first step now.
Nice, thanks. Anything else on block access lists? Okay, then I had a couple things for just the rest of the EIPs being proposed for Amsterdam. So first off, there's a lot of gas price or repricing EIPs that are being proposed. So Maria and Ansgar put together a meta EIP to try and keep track of them, but it's kind of a unique thing to have like a nested meta EIP. So they had questions about, yeah, how do people think we should approach this? Ansgar, yeah, you want to give some context on it?
Yeah, perfect. So basically, Maria and I were talking with people, and in general, the need came up, or like the idea came up that it would be nice to have a document in general to basically collect and outline kind of all the EIPs in flight around repricing, because we also expect that will still kind of quite actively be a topic of iteration for the next few months, or next 2 months at least or something. We were basically we chose to do it as a meta EIP, at least as of now, and then wanted to get a little bit of feedback on whether meta EIP is the right format and whether people think that's useful. The idea specifically would be that the meta EIP does not have any specific role in the governance process. So include like being listed on the meta EIP would not directly correlate to inclusion decisions in Glamstam. We would in the meta EIP kind of basically just list the status of this is kind of where it's at in the governance process as well, just for convenience. But the meta EIP would be more like a document that then could be useful also, for example, in like early devnets, and basically just like as some sort of specifying some sort of just like recommended set of EIPs. We after some talking with people, we think that meta EIP might be the most useful kind of version of that kind of document, but we'd also be happy to kind of change it to just some other thing. I think Pari had the point that it would be nice to be version controlled, so we can just like target specific versions for devnets or something like this. So yeah, but basically just looking for feedback. And maybe one more point there, the reason why it's kind of Maria and I is that Davide and I used to kind of lead the research on this topic from the EF side in the past. Davide is now moving to other topics, but Maria is now taking over from him. So going forward, it will be kind of Maria from our side as the domain experts, and then kind of me in collaboration. So any kind of more research side topics you have around repricing, I think would be best discussed with Maria going forward.
Thanks. Any comments? Okay. Because it seems like I think we can give this a try. And yeah, it is also like, yeah, version control on EIPs is something we've talked about in a bunch of contexts and never really adopted. So this might actually be a good place. Yeah, to test this. Roman, are you asking about in general on the gas limit testing efforts, or just for this EIP, like which repricing do we want to do?
Yeah, in general, but I'm asking this now because both are kind of intertwined.
Yeah, so we have this. Yeah, so I guess we have these two Telegram channels that are like quite high activity, and then the Nethermind team has just been keeping like the high level, the high level bottlenecks in this markdown that I shared. I don't know that we have any kind of intermediate resolution. So you either have like the 10 bullet points skim, or the two groups with hundreds of messages.
Yeah, we do some summaries on ACDT. So
Yeah.
I guess that might be the second best approach. But yeah, I mean, TLDR, the limits for 60 million gas are listed there. Most of the work right now is on state bottlenecks, and we're focusing on sync related state bottlenecks, and we have 2x mainnet state already to test with.
Okay, and yes, Mario shared. Actually, yeah, it might actually be a good idea to just share if we could link the Grafana dashboards. I don't know if these are actually public.
Yeah, so docs has been a bit lacking, and we wanted to wait to finish rebasing the benchmarking tool on top of East. And I think Camille has basically achieved that over the last 2 days this week. So I would assume soon we would focus on documentation. We'll make sure all the links are in one place and yeah, make it a bit easier, I guess.
Awesome, thanks. And yeah, on the state side, Carlos shared the Bloatnet page which also has a ton of status updates. Yeah, hopefully we can start to align all these different resources, but yeah, for now it's a bit of a mess. Okay, so yeah, back to repricing, so we can keep the EIP, experiment with it, and yeah, see how useful it is through the process. The other thing I want to discuss, so now that we have set the headliners for the fork, we should eventually review and at some point decide which EIPs to include. we said that the deadline to propose EIPs for the fork would be when the Fusaka mainnet releases go live, which is still, at least a month or a couple months away. There's already 18 proposed EIPs, and I think there's a couple more that just haven't been merged in yet. So I can expect we'll get 20 or 30 of them. I wanted to check in with teams about like how should we go about reviewing these, not even like making decisions about them, but just when and how do we want to discuss or ask questions about them. Besu shared their preferences, and I think historically what we've done is kind of have people semi-randomly show up on this call and pitch their EIPs and not be super systematic about it. And it just gets harder as the number of EIPs scale. Like if we have 30 EIPs and we give them each 10 minutes, that's 300 minutes of call time. So yeah, curious how people think we can do this. Yeah, Justin?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify real quick. I wanted to be very explicit that these are the EIPs that we listed that we would like to hear more about.
Yeah.
So that might be a mechanic that we can leverage. We're going to get this list, like you said, it's going to be 30 long. It might be the point where we have to schedule people and say, hey, you made it to, you have this much interest from the core devs, please show up on X date and present this one. And we might just have to actually coordinate this. I think that the important part of this is that the core devs reach out and say, hey, the following, EIPs have questions that need to be answered. These are the questions, and proactively set an agenda for them to come in and discuss.
And yeah, Tony, sorry, I didn't mean like a full-on presentation, but I think each that we actually want to consider probably takes some time on the call to discuss the trade-offs. And it's not clear that there's probably some EIPs we don't even want to bring up on the call because no one thinks they're like a serious candidate. Yeah, so I think it would be good to have some sort of like pre-filtering. And I think a requirement for this is like that teams actually have the time to look through the list. And I know that there's already a lot of things going on, and like we're asking people to focus on like on many things in parallel. So like if teams feel like they have the bandwidth to actually at least look through the list and like flag the 5-ish or whatever most interesting ones they want to discuss, like Besu, that seems pretty straightforward. Like starting on the next call, we could try to have more conversations about the ones Besu listed, or if there's ones other teams want to discuss too. But is that realistic? Like, do people think in the next week or 2 weeks they can even open the list of 20 EIPs and figure out which 5 or 6 are most important? And yes, obviously we have ETH magicians, like Greg says, so we can do this async. I think we should try to do as much of that as we can, but realistically, yeah, we do end up discussing a bunch on the call, and yeah, we can potentially improve the curation there. If no one else has thoughts, then I think I'm happy to reach out to the EIPs that Besu listed, or potentially, give people a couple more days to share their preferences, and then for the next ACDE, we can have a set of them present. There were a couple people who wanted to present today, and we have some time left. So if there's nothing else people want to discuss, we can also do that. And if folks don't want to sit through the presentations, can obviously hop off a bit early. But before we do that, any other thoughts on just how we approach this? Okay, so yeah, let's see if client teams share more EIPs. I'll follow up with the ones Besu mentioned, and then we can spend the rest of the call trying to go over the ones. I think there were 5 that people wanted to discuss. First one being EIP 2926 by Guillaume.
Yep. It's a short presentation, so you don't have to worry. I just need to find how I can share my screen. Here we go. Can you guys see it?
Yes.
Yes.
Wow, that was the fastest I ever was able to do it. Yeah, so EIP 2926 is actually a very old EIP. It's starting to be a tradition at this point, but it's an EIP that was resurrected. It's an EIP that dates from 2020 and introduced code chunking in the MPT. And the reason for this to be resurrected was a discussion we had at the interop with, well, first there was a suggestion by Tomasz, and then we talked about it with Ignacio and Joachim, and I think that's it. To introduce code chunking, because code chunking brings some advantages immediately, and we don't have to wait for binary trees and or vertical trees, but in all likelihood binary trees to be implemented and tested in mainnet. So what does that do? Like I said, it's merkleization in the MPT. What we changed from the initial EIP is that we bring in some of the learnings that we did while working on Verkle and binary trees. So we have 31 byte chunks with 1 byte of push data. We have EIP 4762, or at least the code access part of it. This is still an open question, but I don't think it's going to be a very complex one. The question is just how much do we pay for code chunk accesses? There's a very well thought out gas price for Verkle that we could reuse. There seemed to be some thinking when during the interop we were considering 7903 or 7909. I don't remember the number just now. That the code access should be much cheaper, so that's why it's still an open question, but I don't think it's a very complex one. And yes, it requires a transition, like an overlay, actually not an overlay tree transition, but something a bit similar, something that is defined in EIP 7612. But because we're only chunking the code and inserting it in the tree, it will take less than 1 day, probably an hour, to be honest. But yeah, it needs to be implemented and tested to know for sure. Okay, I don't know why I can't go to the next slide. Yeah, so the TLDR, nothing changes in the EOAs. You still have the nonce, the balance, the code hash, and the storage root. But for contracts, you add 2 extra fields, the code size, so that you can just access like you can serve Xcode size immediately. And then the code root, which is another MPT, just like the storage tree, that is where chunks are just added sequentially, except for the last field, which is the last addressable integer, which gives you the version. And the version is probably going to be RLP. So if we encode it as 0x as 0 and not 0x80, we could just not have the version until we start using different versions for accounts. The transition, this is just a quick explainer. You have an iterator head that goes over all the accounts in the state. So like the black squares are just the nonce, the balance, everything. And then the green squares are the code hash. So if the code hash is the non-empty hash represented by the empty set symbol here, then there's a contract, and the contract here is represented by a scroll. And so at every block, the iterator moves by n values and just sees if the contract is if the account is a contract, and if it's a contract, they will go get the code, chunk it, insert it, and add the extra fields. This is much simpler than the overlay tree because you can check if the conversion has happened for a given account by the presence of this storage root, this code root field. But if you know that this is you can easily know whether an account or is a contract or not. So, for example, here, if it doesn't have, if it has a non-empty hash but doesn't have a code root and a code size, you know this hasn't been converted, so you can fall back to the old behavior. Yeah, so just a quick summary. The difference with binary trees and Verkle, well, we're using the MPT. We're not using a unified tree. We're just using we're just doing the same thing as we do with the storage tree. And sorry, this is wrong. I meant well, we could potentially get rid of the account version. So this is my slide is wrong here. Yeah, why do we need this now? Because it solves some, or at least it helps mitigate some attacks against the KVMs that we know of. And it's a simple fix for increasing the code size, because if you make the code as large as you want, each chunk access will cost money, so or cost gas. So you can disincentivize executing too much code this way, and yeah, you get the code size field in the account, so you can serve that without having to load the entire code and compute its size. And yeah, that's pretty much it. If there are questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Thanks. I guess, yeah, I had a question around what the, end user benefits are, which is answered cheaper proving times or cheaper proving for certain worst cases and smaller proofs. Dragan is asking what the downsides of this EIP are.
I mean, I can't think of any, to be honest, except that the conversion might scare people off. And but it's, like I said, it's a much simpler one. The other downside is that it feels like this is settling down, like we could have the better model with a unified tree and everything. And people might say, well, look, this is good enough, let's stop there. So the other downsides, well, okay, I should have answered that better. The other downside, of course, is that people, like, there will be an increase in gas costs, but I don't think you can go around that. And that if you need to pass proofs, you will find yourself with extra chunks in your proofs. So some tooling will need to be updated, which is still an open question. I don't know who will be affected by this in the short term.
Thank you. Any other questions? Otherwise, we can move on to the other EIPs. Okay, Kevin's asking, could we benchmark the performance increase for ZK provers?
Sorry, I didn't quite get the question. Kev, I know it's Kev, but that was too fast for me to read. Could we benchmark the performance increase for ZK provers? Yeah, we can. I mean, someone needs a proof of concept first. I don't really want to make the mistake of writing a ton of code for something that's going to end up in the garbage. But if it gets included, I will gladly I will gladly take the code that already exists, adapt it, and you could have that in a week, in less than a week.
Okay, thank you. Okay, then anything else on these? Sorry, on this one, otherwise we can move on. Mark had two EIPs that he wanted to bring up, 7793 and 7843. Mark, are you on the call?
Yeah, hello. Yeah, I don't have a presentation, but I just wanted to kind of give a quick pitch so that maybe people can review async, or maybe I can kind of speak a bit more about it if there's interest. So the first one is EIP 7843. And this is the slot num opcode. So this is like a very simple EIP that just returns a slot number on chain. And the motivation for this is kind of making it easier to change the slot length in future. So currently, you can calculate the current slot by doing some like basic maths with a timestamp, but this would break if we change the timestamp in future. And there are other ways you could potentially do it, like kind of proving against the beacon block route and stuff. But then these other ways are quite kind of gas expensive. So I think that in reality, people would likely fall back to the kind of sleep way that would break. So where I see it, this like EIP is like very simple, kind of low-hanging fruit that will just kind of give us one less thing to worry about if we're going to change the slot length, you know, in maybe in a few hard forks time. So yeah, that's quite a small one. And then so the other one is EIP 7793, which is called conditional transactions. And the motivation behind this is improving support for encrypted mempools. So these are kind of like a cryptographic mechanism, if you don't know, that can give users protection against front running. So to kind of quickly explain how this would work. So slot X, user submits an encrypted transaction. All of these encrypted transactions, along with other users, they're all ordered. And then in slot X plus 1, then the unencrypted transactions are put at the top of the block, and the order should match the ordering that was kind of determined before. And so the motivation here is currently there's not really a good way of actually enforcing this ordering. So we unencrypt it, we have the ordering, but there's not really a good way of actually, you know, knowing for sure that these transactions actually were placed in the correct order. So what this EIP does is add a new transaction type called a conditional transaction. And essentially this just adds a field where you can specify the index of the transaction where you want it to land in the block. So I can send my transaction and say, I want this to be at index 1, and it will only be valid, it will only execute if it's actually included at that point. And so between that and also doing some kind of smart contract logic on chain, then you can enforce the logic of the encrypted mempool. So the one other part of this EIP is there's the new transaction type, conditional transactions, and then there's one new opcode to go along with it, which allows you to actually, if this is a conditional transaction that's being executed, then you can check what the actual index is on chain in order to enforce it. And so, as I say, this kind of allows encrypted mempools to actually have a lot stronger guarantees against front running, and allows this logic to actually be enforced. But yeah, that's what I wanted to talk about. But with the second one, if there's interest, then I can prepare something a little bit more in detail.
Yeah, Marius has a comment about the amount of work that the conditional transactions would add to the mempool. Do you have a sense for the implementation complexity there?
I mean, I'll have a think more about that and kind of maybe just discuss with Marius kind of what he thinks the problem with is there.
Sounds good. Any other questions or comments? Okay, then last up, POTA has also had 2 EIPs, which I think are still waiting to be merged. I'll put the PRs in the chat, but yeah, POTA, do you want to?
Yeah, this is going to be really faster than Mark. Hopefully, I also won't have a presentation, and I just wanted to keep the ball running, to have the ball running. The idea would be to try to separate a little bit more execution from consensus. Today, we have this mechanism to send requests from the execution layer to the consensus layer. And every time that we need to add a new request type, because we just want to have some new feature being provided on the consensus layer, we need a hard fork that would involve both layers, the EL and the CL. We will need to have a new contract deployed on chain. We'll need to have a bunch of things like the EL will need to do different things and add a new list in the payload or in the payload envelope in the future. When we actually today we have this consolidations contract that is already quite generic. The consolidations request, the EL sends us a signature verified from the withdrawal credential of a public key for a validator, and then a second public key, which is 48 bytes that can be actually interpreted anyways on the CL. So what this idea of this EIP is to just reuse that contract to pass on the second public key from the same contract to pass on the last 48 bytes arbitrary data to the CL to interpret however the CL wants to. This way, for example, we can just add a feature. I mean, this came from discussions into adding a feature to convert your validator into a builder after EPBS and to overload already the consolidations request contract. There's a tons of trade-offs. I mean, the good one is that it allows the CL to do a hard fork without ever involving the EL. On the other hand, it would reuse a contract that is expected to be for something with a particular cadence, with a particular number of requests per block, and then we might add some new request type that might require many more, for example. There's issues about pricing. There's a bunch of reasons why not to do this, and a bunch of reasons why we should do this. And I just wanted to have the right people involved in the discussions.
Thanks. Felix?
Yeah, just as a quick note, so definitely I'm interested in this stuff. I was very interested also in the execution layer requests. And I think from my end, yeah, it sounds pretty great to make it more generic. At the same time, the mechanism is already very generic. So it's not we actually made sure that it's not a lot of work to add in the ELs, like new request types. And also I want to mention that the consolidation contract is not extensible in any way, and neither are any of the other system contracts that we use right now. So it will have to be a new contract anyways. So
no. Like, I want to reuse the same contract actually. So that's the whole point. Like if you look at the second PR to actually use it for builder changes, it uses the exact same construct on the CL. We process them in the same place in process consolidation requests. It's just that we interpret the second 48 bytes in an arbitrary way.
Oh, well, I mean, as long as it's 48 bytes, it's totally fine. I mean, you guys can interpret it however you like, but definitely, like, if you ever want to store a different number of bytes, then it will have to be another contract. That's really my whole point.
Yeah, more than 48 bytes of data would be pretty bad for that contract.
Okay, anything else on POTUS's EIPs? Okay, thanks, POTUS. I think this covers everything we had on the agenda. Anything else people wanted to discuss before we wrap up? Okay, great. Well, we can wrap up here then. Thanks, everyone, and we'll talk to you all soon. Have a good day.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks.